Hi and welcome to On Two Wheels, and this is another video on the DRZ Rally project. Stay tuned. This video was supposed to be about how I built the brackets and the rally tower. With stage 4 lockdown coming into place, the whole project had to be put on hold. I've had to resort into doing other modifications or other minor tasks on the bike. So something else that I've been planning to do on the bike was to refresh the look, and the black panels themselves were fairly old and scratched up and didn't look very nice. So what I did was get a roll of vinyl wrap and wrap all the panels so that it looks a lot nicer. Wrapping can be a fairly easy thing to do, and the learning process is fairly simple. You might have to redo a few panels, but again, if you've got enough wrap, it doesn't cost much. You could just redo the whole thing. So especially on a dirt bike, there are benefits in doing a vinyl wrap over spray paint. The most important being that if you do drop the bike, you wouldn't be scratching up the paint. So even if the vinyl does tear, you could just rewrap that entire panel, and that's a pretty small task. So these are some of the parts that I've wrapped. So the tail section looks pretty nice if you check it out. Then the side panels, this is for the left hand side, also looks pretty good. The second panel, and I should have the right panel is already on, so that also has come out pretty okay. So this is the right panel, that's also on pretty well. But the tricky bit is wrapping certain areas which have a three-dimensional surface. For example, something like the front fender. Because the front fender has that curvature, it becomes a little bit trickier. So I'll talk about the fender in a little while. But before we get to that, one of the more complicated parts to wrap is the tank, especially a plastic tank. So I use a 17-liter Safari. Right now you see that there's quite a bit of scuff marks from all the rides that I've been on. So the issue with the plastic tank is that the petrol within the tank tends to breathe, and that means over time you get petrol vapor coming out through the plastic and pretty much getting collected in a vinyl wrap if it's completely covered. So I first tested this out with a piece of leftover vinyl wrap, and I noticed that how bad it was. So if you see, it's got a lot of little air bubbles or air pockets that have collected. And then I tried the actual vinyl wrap that I planned to use, the carbon fiber finish, that also had similar air bubbles. So then in an attempt to try to remedy the air bubbles collecting in the vinyl wrap, I tried something else. So here we are on the other side of the tank. As you see, it's a lot more shiny and looks pretty new. But as you get closer, you will see that it's still a vinyl wrap, and you've got a lot of imperfections, and a lot of these imperfections are actually air bubbles or petrol vapor bubbles between the tank and the wrap. So this isn't just an issue for DIY vinyl wraps, even the factory tanks do have this issue. So what a lot of manufacturers do is that they cut little perforations onto the vinyl wrap so that the vapor can escape. So in this case, I did the exact same thing. So if you look closer, there have been little slits cut into the vinyl. So I've cut these as 2 centimeter slits, leaving 2 centimeter gaps. In a lot of these cases, you see that it's pretty good, but you do see some air bubbles. I can push the individual air bubbles out, but it's not something that I want to keep doing on a daily basis. So another thing that you will notice is that you get a lot more bubbles at the bottom of the tank than at the top. So that's because there's only about a third of a tank of petrol. So essentially about this much is petrol, and all the bubbles tend to form around the area that you've got petrol in the tank rather than air in it. So the tank is a very tricky one, and I'm still not sure on how I want to address the whole issue. I'm a big fan of the carbon fiber look. So depending on the lighting situation, it could be a light gray or even as dark as a black. And at the same time, it covers slight imperfections and scratches. So if you look at the front fender over here, it looks just nice. So let's talk about wrapping the front fender. The front fender is a bit of a tricky part to wrap because it's got a curved surface. So that means a two-dimensional sheet won't perfectly fit on it. And even though vinyl wrap can stretch to an extent, you should try to not stretch it too much, because over time the heated vinyl tries to contract back to its original shape. So that means it's going to start coming off or cause bubbles or wrinkles throughout the surface. So what I did with this wrap is cut 5 different strips and went with the first strip, second strip, third strip, fourth and fifth, and made sure that there was a decent amount of overlap so that you don't see the original Fender. And I think I kind of went overboard with it because I ended up wrapping the frame guards as well. It actually looks quite nice in carbon fiber wrap as well. The look I want to go for is a pure carbon fiber black and white theme. So the less silver or chrome that I have on it, the better. So I'm now looking at the right hand side of the bike. So we've got the big single panel here, and as you see, it's got a nice and shiny look. This part is wrapped as 2 individual sections. So we've got the main section or the hump as a single piece, and then the little pointy section wrapped separately. Also I ended up wrapping the brake reservoir cover and the frame guard here as well. Again, it looks really nice when it's wrapped in carbon fiber. I know that it's not real carbon fiber, and anyone who looks at it will know that it isn't real carbon fiber, but I'm just a big fan of the carbon fiber color and the texture, and it just looks really nice. So that's something else I want to kind of show, which is probably one of the most useless pieces that I've wrapped. That's the hand guards. So the hand guards on this bike were actually yellow, and it definitely doesn't go with the bike. So what I did was I spray painted it black and then carbon fiber wrapped it as well. So this is probably going to be the first piece that's going to get scratched up when I drop the bike, but it's an easy wrap and it looks really good. So because the bash plate is a very prominent silver, I want to try and cover that up. So I'm going to wrap this in carbon fiber as well. So first thing I need to do is take it off. So I have just taken off the bash plate, and it's a bit dirty, so I need to clean it up first. But essentially it's a very simple wrap because it's got flat surfaces throughout. So having flat surfaces makes any wrap a lot easier. And even though you might notice that we've got a couple of curves here, these curves are easy to work around because they are single straight lines rather than a curved surface altogether. So let's clean it up first and see what we can do. And another benefit of wrapping a panel over spray painting it is that you could always undo it without having any residue or any ill effects. So this panel isn't something that will probably last very long with a wrap, but I'd like to see what it looks like. This is at the bottom of the bike. So if you look at it even as of now, you'll see a lot of little specks or dents, a lot of scratches from dropping the bike. So these are areas that probably won't last very long, but let's see how it goes. So I'm going to start wrapping the bash plate now. But before I start the wrap, I'll walk you through the things you need to have ready for the wrapping job. First of all, you need an actual vinyl wrap. So I've used this carbon fiber roll. So I bought I think it was 5 meters. It comes in different dimensions. If you go on eBay, you'll find small pieces which are just 15 centimeters by 30, or pretty much an entire roll. So it comes in a maximum width of 1.5 meters, and the length can be anything between 1 meter to 30 meters. So depending on the part that I wrap, I'll cut an appropriate size without trying to waste too much of it. And next we'll look at the other equipment you need. You need a squeegee to make sure that it's evenly distributed, a box cutter with a fine blade. It helps to buy a knife and multiple blades just in case. Then you need a heat gun. So I've got a very basic heat gun from Bunnings. It's good enough for the work that I do. I think it was about $20–25, and having a heat gun definitely helps in shaping up the vinyl. A pair of scissors helps, and another important thing you need to have is a wrapping glove. So a wrapping glove is a glove made of a sort of a microfabric. So the reason you need a wrapping glove is to reduce the amount of friction between your hand and the vinyl when smoothing things over. So if you try to pretty much, let's say, push vinyl with your finger, you'll notice that it kind of gets stuck, or it's a lot harder to push, but the glove will slide over a lot better. So I've cut out a section that I think is big enough for the bash plate, and so we've got the actual vinyl side of it, and on the other side you'll notice that they've got a grid pattern printed on it, and these happen to be 2 centimeter or 1 centimeter squares, so which makes measuring and cutting a lot easier. So I'm going to start wrapping the bash plate now. First, I need to make sure that everything is as clean and smooth as possible. I now mark the center line and take off half of the backing paper from the vinyl wrap. So if you're new to this, it's good to start by taking off only a section of the backing paper off first and doing it in parts, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself with vinyl that's too big. And something to keep note of is you should always start in the middle. So start in the middle and move outwards. Make sure the surface is evenly distributed, that there's no air bubbles. And if you feel that the vinyl is a bit hard, you could use the heat gun to make the vinyl a bit softer, which helps you maneuver it around corners and edges. Using the wrapping glove, you can make sure that the vinyl properly sticks onto the surface. If you end up with excess paper, make sure you cut a slit and overlap the vinyl sheet rather than attempt a fine line with both edges. Again, use the heat gun to soften the vinyl and stretch it around corners. So with the edges of the vinyl, there's two ways I handle it. If it's an edge on a panel that's pointing up, it's always good to have the excess vinyl pointing downwards so that it doesn't collect water. And similarly, if you're doing a bottom surface, make sure that there is no excess vinyl that can collect water on top of the panel. And in this case, I'm making sure that the bash plate doesn't have any vinyl edges that can catch water. So this is how I approach the rear fender. Again, I make sure I have a vinyl that's big enough, and then I try to get the vinyl down in a single motion to minimize wrinkles. So you'll notice that I'm sticking it in the middle first and then moving towards the edges. I use the squeegee to make sure that the vinyl is properly and evenly distributed along the surface. So this is a quick look on how I did the side panels. Again, I start off with a section of vinyl that's big enough for the entire panel, and then I start at the bottom, and little by little I take off the backing paper and make sure that the vinyl sticks onto the panel sufficiently. So in this case, because the panel is not a flat surface, I'm using my finger to apply pressure and get the vinyl to stick. So when I reach the top edge, I make sure that the vinyl works around the corner rather than heat it and stretch it. So the next step is cutting the excess vinyl. Because this is on a plastic panel, I make sure that I don't apply excess pressure and damage the plastic. I then clear the holes for the bolts and fasteners. So the right hand panel was not in a very good condition. After numerous drops, it was scratched up and had a very uneven surface. So I used a 180 grit sandpaper with some water to even it out and take away the obvious scars and dings. I then wiped away all the excess water and dried the panel. In this case, I'm also using the heat gun to melt the plastic to an extent, because the heat actually helps some of the plastics to melt and even out. So I take my time to make sure that the vinyl is evenly applied throughout the panel, and for the excess I use the box cutter to cut a smooth line along the edge. So wrapping isn't something that you will start and master in a day. There'll be plenty of times that you'll go wrong and you'll have to redo an entire panel. So the best thing is start with a small panel, start with a flat panel and practice. The more you do, the more you'll realize and learn how the vinyl behaves and how the heat affects everything. So I hope this video was useful and gave you a few tips on what you can do with vinyl and what you can do about, well, giving a bike a fresh look. So this video ended up being a bit longer than usual, but if you found it useful, make sure to give it a like and let me know what you found useful and if there's any other questions you have. And don't forget to subscribe to On Two Wheels. Thank you for watching. And with that, we wrap up this video.